U.S. poverty. And so the U.S. always will talk about U.S. poverty and its issues, its crises having to do with money and how we're at a deficit. And a lot of times you'll hear that from like newsreels or from um, there'll be like something in the morning news or in the morning paper about unemployment. And I was looking at a few articles, and the articles sparked a lot of controversy. I even look at old articles because a lot of times things that happen in the past shapes what happens in the future. And so I'm just going to get right into it. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about certain issues because they don't want to be called a racist. But I really believe, in terms of black and Hispanic and Latino, whatever you want to coin it, people of color have been put against each other in competition based on jobs and money in the U.S. And I believe that this is what has destroyed a lot of relationships and has brought the race issues about and tensions between blacks and Hispanics in like local communities and smaller communities. And it's sad because both groups are not thriving in terms of wealth. They're just really trying to live and trying to survive and trying to feed their families. There are some good people and then there's some bad people in every culture. And I want to make that known. I'm not trying to just look and focus at only one, but I am going to focus on one. And I'm going to start off by saying I know some people may not want to receive it, but it's the truth. I live here and this is what I see and this is what I know and this is what I've been exposed to. So I'll be honest. I know that in the beginning, Donald Trump, he made mention of a hot button issue. Um, Trump, he says Mexico is not sending us their best. And so he went on to say that they were sending us criminals, drug dealers, and rapists that were crossing the border. So he went on, and I'm not going to read the whole article. It's not really that long, though. It says, when do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they are beating us economically. So I want you to listen to that word, economically. That's very important when you think about the U.S. because the U.S., America, is about capitalism. We hear a lot about that, like corporate America, how they don't pay their taxes and how they just are greedy and they're about consumership. They want you to buy, and consume, and they don't want to give back. They don't want to pay taxes. They have offshore accounts. We've heard that with Bernie Sanders' campaign. And so we've also heard that America is in debt and that has a great deficit. So I was just looking at some of these articles. And so if you really focus on this, you see that all of this has to do with money. And that might explain the reason why there's deportation. Because if you have a group of people who you allow amnesty and you assume that everybody's coming here to work, and then you have some people who are coming to work and others who they just bring their problems and their poverty with them and they don't work. Now you have an influx of people along with the people who are already here that they also have problems. Now it's an even bigger, huge problem. So the U.S. amnesty, it says that the U.S. has been in the headlines for some time with immigration and amnesty. So it's a political hot button in the U.S. So most people have a strong opinion on how they think about government and how it should handle this situation. So the official definition of amnesty is a decision that a group of people will not be punished or that that group of prisoners will be allowed to go free. Regarding illegal immigrants in the U.S. amnesty policy grants citizenship to illegal immigrants who have lived in the country for a certain amount of time and to families of those immigrants. Okay. So I have heard a lot of talk about deportation. I went over videos like that, and also went back on a video where it talked about how, I've heard people in the Hispanic community that said, oh, Obama, he deported a lot of people. Its tensions over President Barack Obama's next course of executive action on immigration have reached a boiling point for many on the right who fear incorrectly that the president will soon offer a blanket amnesty for millions of undocumented immigrants. Okay, so this was President Barack Obama. Ronald Reagan's amnesty haunts immigration action. So I'm jumping around now. Okay, so there was this talk about Obama being the deporter in chief, and then he turned around and created this, what is called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. On June 15, 2012, President Barack Obama created a new policy calling for deferred action for childhood arrivals, undocumented young people who came to the U.S. as children. So I always tend to go on that, because if you look at Donald Trump, he, I believe, is the one that is pushing for more deportation. And there's been a lot of raids out here. There's been a lot of ICE. There's been a lot of more deportations, and I believe Obama, when he was in office, there was pressure for him to deport because of this. What you're seeing clips of people how they feel, this ill feeling about amnesty that is granted for illegal immigrants. So this is this dissent of people who do not want amnesty. So you'll see signs saying no amnesty, amnesty hurts American workers. So there's that issue about jobs and about money. So there's lots of competition here in the U.S. for people to be employed, people to work. And when you live in cities in the U.S., such as California, you have Los Angeles. It's like affluent city where you have people who are, they're striving for education, higher education, and then higher education used to mean when you get higher education and you get more degrees that you get more pay. Well, more recently we found that that isn't the case for everybody. You get more in debt because you have student loans when you go to these universities and these colleges, and then you're left with that. That's if you can secure a job, and there's not many jobs. And then these jobs, when you do find a job or a career that you get into, you're not starting at the pay that you would desire to be starting at. And then there's competition because everybody's trying to get that same job. So there's a lot of competition. So I believe that the reason why we have a lot of issues that people think is just race-based, it isn't. There's money involved. There is competition with jobs. There's competition out in the workforce. And there's also even competition before you get to the workforce with education. Who's going to get into the best schools? Who's going to get educated? And how much education do you possess? And also experience in jobs. So if you look in the local smaller communities like such as Compton and Watts and some of these other communities, which were thriving communities that had a lot of black citizens, a lot of those citizens were run out of the communities through the gang violence. Mexican gangs overrun the cities and their way of running them out so that they can move more of the people that look like them in. So you see the dissent here. But who do you see the dissent coming from? In other words, what I'm saying is the feelings that illegal aliens hurt U.S. workers. This is, look who's holding the signs. So it's even affecting white community. So they feel like they can't get employed because they're hiring illegal immigrants of cheaper labor. And so I was looking at an article that was talking about how there was this problem where you had an economic impact granting amnesty to millions of people who were already living in the U.S. Extremely positive right off the bat, said Paul, professor at the Cesar Chavez Department of Chicano Studies at UCLA, it drove up the wages because people were empowered to operate in the market with a greater right. But not everything worked out as planned. Reagan's initial intent was to tighten the border security and stem the flow of immigrants coming into the future, and to place sanctions on employers continuing to hire undocumented immigrants. Instead, the undocumented immigrant population in the U.S. exploded to 5 million in 1986 to more than 11 million today. The rise of identity fraud became a major issue, and fake documents applications became the cornerstone of the undocumented labor market. The sanctions against employers did little to block illicit hiring. The poor foresight failed to anticipate future growth in migration across the border. In 1986, amnesty law also led to lasting demographic shifts and voting changes that so far have titled in Democrats' favor. So I'm not going to read all of that. You can read it. I'll leave the articles. But do you see these people? You see the manicured lawns and the lawn workers. And so George Ramos is a news, he's on the news, Latin news stations, Univision, and he always says that immigrants do the work that other Americans won't do. And every time he says this, I most often feel that he's referring to blacks. But see, George Ramos, if you look back in history and look at what happened to black people, a lot of those jobs that you see the immigrants that are doing now today, blacks have already done it. And we know we have rights. And so we're not coming here the same way that the people you see coming here now today are. We're forced here. And so there's a difference. And see, that's the problem. People don't read about other people's history. They don't look and they don't study about other people's history. They just look at them and what's happening today. And this is what I see in the neighborhoods, in the local neighborhoods. These clips that you're seeing, this is not something that was made up. This is what has happened and is happening. If it isn't ICE, if it isn't raids, it's this kind of stuff that we see. And people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be coined as quote racist. But we do have, I'm not saying that there aren't other gangs of other cultures. Now let me explain this. There are gangs in every culture. There's crime in every culture. We know this. There's ghettos in every culture and neighborhoods and areas. There's always something everywhere you go. But here in California, we do have a lot of Hispanic gangs. We have a lot of Mexican gangs. We have crime that they do commit. There's a group, certain people that are out there that aren't trying to look for work, and then those who are, maybe they can't because they have a police record or something like that. So this has happened and is happening as we speak. So this has happened. This is true. So I believe a lot of the frustration is tied around money, competition, and competition for resources. And so when resources begin to get low, that's when you hear these news stations talk about, oh, the U.S. is in debt. And so when you have people that come from a place, if they're coming because they're coming from a war-torn situation or a distressed situation or a country that is in distress, and they're poor and they're bringing poverty or whatever with them, then they're going to have to utilize public assistance services. And so that then means taxpayers' monies. And the government looks at this and they say, wait a minute, we have too many problems from other places. And so this is costing the U.S. a lot of money. And so we're going in the hole. We're going deeper and deeper in debt. And so that is why we have such a massive race for deportation to happen promptly, even more so now. And now this thing with the wall. So when you really read all these articles, this is what I'm getting from this. But race always has to be thrown in there in the pot. And so this is comedian George Lopez, and there was an incident where he was on stage and he was shouting, and there was some other comedians that supported him, that like him. But if you really pay attention now, a lot of this is a distraction. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but to put different people that are, even if, let's say, you got two cultures that have come from backgrounds that have been have or had experienced a level of oppression, but they're putting them against one another, and they throw race in the mix. And so there's this competition for resources. And so you have these people who they're fighting for housing, they're fighting for government assistance or money or to secure some type of wealth here in America, and it's hard. And so you see this guy here, he's trying to cover his ears. It's not because I just thought it was funny, but some of the things that I've experienced, there are some Hispanic Mexican people who are racist towards blacks. There's been tensions in the black communities. So, sometimes they'll have like a loud party. They don't forewarn you that they're having the party. They'll have like a lot of family members over. Everybody has a car, and so they block, driveways. They block, certain, ways. There's beer bottles everywhere. And then sometimes you'll have guys hanging out at a liquor store. They're drinking a lot of beer, and they put the beer bottles and sit them out at the curb. They'll put beer bottles, certain guys, Mexican descent, will put beer bottles in the yards of their neighbors. I've seen this done. I'm not gonna make up a story. Sometimes they'll say racial things online towards black people because they there's fear, there's competition for resources and for securing wealth here in America, and because of the deportation thing, it's a hot button topic. So a lot of times you'll hear like, go back to Africa. Black people have heard this from Mexican people telling black people, oh well, they're African, they should go back to Africa. And they don't read the history of black people and black culture, that all black people are not from Africa. And so that's the ignorance that you get from some Mexican people. It's the same thing. It's like everybody's not Mexican. Some people are from other countries in Latin America. There are other cultures in Latin America, and it's the same for black Americans. Not every black person is from Africa or from the same places and do the same things or have the same languages and have the same cultures. They might be black, but they might have a different way of speaking, a different religion, a different value system. So this is the sad part, and you got two cultures that have had histories of oppression, things that have been dealt to them, and it's sad. So this is where we're at, and now you have this system here that thrives at continuing to put people against one another. And it's all, I believe, based on money and resources. And when resources or funds become depleted, they use this as a vehicle to distract people so that you don't know the real reasons of what they're about to do. So then these laws come into play where they start deportation or they start cutting back government programs, and they hurt all of us. So not just one group. Thank you for listening.